people may hear the word astroturfing and assume I'm talking about the stiff, unforgiving sports field that absolutely roasts you the second it gets above 80 degrees. You know, the one where the rubber pellets or dirt gets in your socks and is just really annoying, or the stiff underlay, the cement or rock wrecks your joints and you feel incredibly sore afterward. Oxford Reference actually defines astroturfing as promoting a product, service, or idea by seeking to create the false impression that it enjoys widespread grassroots support. In this definition, the false impressions are the astroturf, masquerading as soil, roots, and blades of grass. The rubber pellets, or infill, the dirt, if you will, are the kernels of truth that stick to everything, adding a hint of reality and validity. The cement, or stone underlay, is the pervasive underlying motive that wrecks the knees or joints of public opinion and reframes motives for years to come. Anyone who's spent any amount of time on an astroturf field can attest to the examples I've given, right? I know that my mom has spent far too much time rinsing those pellets out of my soccer cleats or my brother's football gear, and she certainly knows how those pellets get everywhere. Wherever there isn't a biological grass stain, the pellets appear tenfold. Similarly to cleaning up the mess that's created by sharing misinformation and disinformation in error. Misinformation, or factually incorrect or inaccurate information, is a little bit less insidious than disinformation, or false information that is deliberately intended to mislead. A more modern, recent example of standard astroturfing today deals in both misinformation and disinformation, the Plandemic documentary. And yes, that's plan with an L. The first half of Plandemic was released on May 4th, 2020, or mere months into a medical disaster where emotions ran high and everyone was searching for answers. As it was shared, Plandemic perpetuated the narrative that the common man should be afraid of vaccine science, should believe that any and all facial covering would activate the COVID-19 virus, and should believe in pseudoscience remedies such as healing microbes found in the ocean and that they would reverse COVID-19's effects. Now, while many folks were being led, of course, by the fear created by the pandemic itself, you have to consider that in reality, they were being led by a discredited medical scientist whose ultimate vitriol for the community who spurned her was motivating her own actions, or a physical embodiment of rubber pellets. That's not to say, though, that these fears were completely unfounded. This documentary unearthed a place where medical facts and research were still trying to piece together an accurate portrayal of what was and what wasn't real. Was any and all face covering doing anything to lower the number of infections? Did we actually need to stay 6 feet apart in the grocery store? And was there such a thing as being too cautious? We were starved for information, and the dichotomy of right versus wrong was only exacerbated by our need for something to say, and quickly. At that time, it was hard to tell what was a real grass stain and what was plastic. Misinformation and disinformation can be easily misidentified as truth if we don't carefully consider the source. If we don't do that, lies can take hold and burrow deeply in our biases, like grassroots with worse intentions, and create biases and motives that are impossible to confront or even reverse. Now, that's not to say that astroturfing is a partisan phenomena, as every aspect of the political spectrum and side of the aisle has the moral responsibility to be considering the information that they share on social media and in their daily lives. But can you be expected to be sharing the valid or correct thing all the time? Now, I initially became interested in astroturfing as a concept because I wanted to be right or valid as often as possible. I feel as though my generation has had a front row seat to social media's explosion as an industry, and we've all seen that social media has effectively evolved as a source of news. Well over half of Americans use some form of social media, with the most popular platforms being Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And the reality is that social media is unavoidable as a source of news, and we have the responsibility to tweet responsibly, not just in the interest of maintaining world peace, but also to maintain some sort of moral compass. Now, speaking of world peace, although this was a very brief time in my life, you are looking at a former Miss Naugatuck Valley. And I found that in many aspects of pageantry, they parallel both in what you post on social media and how you represent yourself as a moral global citizen. What I found is that the private interview portion of a pageant is often the most mentally grueling aspect, specifically because of the nature of information gathering you need to do. The seasoned or even unseasoned pageant contestant will heavily vet their political candidates, pop culture, and current events, but they will also heavily examine all information they take in. Just as not every pageant contestant, whether new or practiced, has the ability to nail that private interview on the first try, not every citizen with access to the internet and an email address is inherently equipped to objectively utilize media. But can we always objectively utilize media? Of course, much to my chagrin, we can't always be right, but surely there's something that we can do to try to mitigate the number of times that we share information out of outright false sources. The first thing that you should consider before you even get into what you can do personally is consider that not everybody has the same resources and tools at their disposal. If you go back to the pageant example, there are pageant contestants and participants from, just in America, from all 50 states, including the territories. And each of them has their own set of influences, their familial interference, their education background, their morals, their values. It's important to recognize that the Christian nuclear family from North Dakota may have a different set of tools at their disposal than the non-traditional blended family from Boston, Massachusetts, or Hartford, Connecticut. The first thing that you can do to personally try to combat this is consider the source of information. Now, I'm not just talking, your Uncle Joe posted something and your Uncle Joe has a master's degree so you can trust him. I'm asking you to go a little bit further than that. If you see your Uncle Joe posting something from One American News or HuffPost, see if you can corroborate that piece of information with a more centrist news source, or use an online service that helps you check your political bias and coverage. When it comes to seeing that sort of information that's posted organically to your FYP, a little bit of healthy skepticism goes a long way. For example, a Twitter study found that between 2016 and 2018, more than 10 million tweets came from more than 4,500 accounts that were masquerading as American citizens and were in actuality controlled by nefarious Russian influence. And of course, those were very important political times in America. In that example, you can understand why you'd want to follow the trail a little before deciding to repost something. The second thing that you can try to do is try not to act or repost out of emotion. This can be especially difficult when you're considering reposting or talking about something that is especially emotionally or politically charged. Admittedly, this is the most difficult one for me because I am nothing if not an emotional person. A very, very good example. For those of you who are familiar with the Jurassic World movie franchise, you may be familiar with the Velociraptor Blue that Chris Pratt's character raised from infancy. My husband had to tell me when I could look back at the screen when I thought that Blue was going to die. I had a visceral, emotional reaction to the death of a CGI'd Velociraptor. Now, the most shocking part of that is that that isn't real, and it elicited a very emotional, very real reaction from me. And now, while that's a humorous example, in a time where war, suffering, and abject disregard for the human experience is running rampant in our media and in our government, It is essential that we drive with the emotion rather than allowing the emotion to drive you. By doing this, we can work on mitigating that false information that's in our social media bubble. Now, the third thing that you can try to do is give yourself grace and recognize when you've reached the limit of what research or conversation or vetting can tell you. Along with that, realize that the worst thing that you can do is admit that you made a mistake. Use the fact that you posted something and it was incorrect as an opportunity to learn and grow, because unlike AI, you are human and you make mistakes. I'll use another recent example. TikTok and Instagram have posted a great deal of content pertaining to the recent gift of a Boeing 747-8 to President Donald Trump. Now, when you consider emotion and source as a piece of this puzzle, many may have seen this photo, seeing the president ascending the stairs into the aircraft alongside the term, Qatar's bitch. Now, when you see this photo with this particular example, with a news header, time, temperature, stock ticker, other markers that seemingly validate it as truthful, you may think that you're posting a valid or worthy piece of information. If you search the term, Qatar's bitch, multiple iterations of this photo show up in an organic Google search, again, further validating that bias. Now, when you come back to Earth and realize that that is not, in fact, a factual piece of information, you may think, oh, well, I really should have known better. I should have done better. Instead, just acknowledge that it's incorrect. Acknowledge that this time you made a mistake and that the next time you will do better, because again, unlike AI, you are a human who is allowed to make mistakes as a part of your personal growth. You can be armed with those three things and still make mistakes. You can consider the source. You can keep your heart rate in check, your emotions in check, and still share a video of a talking newborn baby. Now, while that's an egregious example, my hope for you is that you take the time to consider the source and consider the intent of the information you're seeing on social media. For some of us who grew up on the less than 24-hour news cycle, radio, and AOL, today we're growing up on AI. In a time where you see information posted all over your social media feed and you question whether or not it's real, take the time to go outside and touch the grass to see if it is real. My hope for you is that the next time you feel dirt in your sock, that you check if it's rubber pellets.